I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Jarrow for bringing forward this debate today, a very, very important debate about IVF provision for the LGBT community, but I think we need to talk about the whole of IVF provision across the country. It's so important, particularly the week before National Fertility Awareness Week, and we're obviously not here next week, unfortunately, so we've got to speak about it this week. Mr Chairman, for me, IVF has become a focal point for much of the work I'm doing in Parliament, ever since I received a disturbing correspondence from a constituent. She told me her story, which I think resonated with women from across the country when I looked into it. She was working in the financial sector. She'd been having a very successful career for 20 years. She decided to use IVF to get pregnant because of her fertility issues. After complications, her employers discovered that she was undergoing IVF treatment. And from that day onwards, the pressure they put on her to move from the UK to Switzerland for her job, which meant that she wouldn't be able to continue with her IVF treatment, she made the really difficult decision to leave her job. Obviously went to an employment tribunal, ended up getting an NDA, and has not been able to speak publicly about her experience and the unfairness that so many people, whatever their sexuality and their gender, face when it comes to IVF provision, and that is why I have taken up her case. Unfortunately, stories like this are repeated too often across the country. And to make matters worse, the availability of treatment, the inability for people to access it due to work commitments is countrywide. Work commitments are not only the constraint on accessing IVF treatment. For example, for years, the availability of treatment has been based on where an individual lives. However, in 2023, has provided us with reasons to be hopeful, I think, for the future. For the first time in over a decade, all areas of England have now got access to NHS-funded facility treatment. But as we've heard from the member for Jarrow, it doesn't always mean that people can get instant access to this. It is vitally important that we do end this postcode lottery that has been established in this country when it comes to accessing IVF treatment. But I think the NHS now estimates that 1 in 7 couples may be struggling to conceive, and obviously with the LGBT community that is higher because of same-sex marriage, it's obvious. And I've always said that infertility does not discriminate. It doesn't matter what your background is. And I have heard some really, really emotional testimony from people from ethnic minorities who have even struggled even further in this country because of egg donation and have to go to Nigeria in particular to get their eggs. And I think we really have to widen up the understanding of how people from ethnic minorities and the LGBT community really struggle even more than same-sex white couples in this country. So I think this is why it's so important to have this debate today. Of course, yeah.
On the point she makes, of course there are many in the LGBT community who will suffer from infertility, but the reality is as a starting point, it's not infertility that's necessarily the issue, it's that we are same-sex. Yeah. And would she recognise that actually the guidelines are based on infertility rather than recognising the unique nature and the difference of various LGBT families? Yeah.
Absolutely, and the Honourable Lady makes an absolute point, so I'm going to come on to about that, but absolutely, and it's always about infertility, isn't it? And it should be about fertility treatment. Mr Chairman, according to the UK fertility regulator, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, it takes an average 3 cycles of IVF to achieve success. And I would like to take this moment to praise the regulator in this area, due to their recent announcement last week, I think it was, in its grading of supplementary fertility treatment to help individuals and couples determine what is proven treatment, safe and cost-effective. That's most welcome. And I've had so many people come to me over the last year or so saying that the cost of IVF can be added on all the time when clinics in particular say, oh, you should have this scan or you might need to have this blood test it might prove more successful. And when you're in this situation, you will do anything you can to get pregnant, and so the costs do add up. So I'm really, really pleased that the HFEA have released this guidance, and I really hope clinics across this country will take note. But nevertheless, Mr. Chairman, fertility treatment is still emotionally draining, costly, risky, and a very long process. But undergoing treatment while juggling a job is particularly tough, whatever your gender and whatever your sexual orientation. Unlike employment legislation, for pregnancy, maternity and paternity, there is no enshrined legislation that compels employers to give time off work for fertility treatment or any initial consultation. And the 2010 Employment Act was well-intentioned and did remove some forms of discrimination in the workplace. Unfortunately, though, it does not help prevent discrimination against those pursuing fertility treatment, as it does not class infertility as a disability. For example, most workplace protection policies exclude elective medical procedures, putting fertility treatment on a par with cosmetic surgery. That is why I introduced the Fertility Workplace Pledge last year. While my private member's bill has faced its difficulties progressing through the House, the Fertility Workplace Pledge, which I launched, asks businesses to voluntarily sign up to provide employees with the support and the time off needed for those undergoing IVF treatment. And we've consistently seen new businesses signing up over the last year, including the likes of Channel 4, Aldi, NatWest, and even the Houses of Parliament have signed up to become a fertility workplace ambassador. And we're getting more and more businesses signing up. I have several a week now, and I would ask members, honourable members in this debate today, if they can encourage employers in their constituencies to look at the Fertility Workplace Pledge and consider signing up. Because if we can do this voluntarily rather than through employment law, then all the better, because it changes the debate and the discussions and the attitude toward fertility treatment. Of course.
I'm grateful for my friend for giving way on that point. She's making a brilliant speech, and I thank her for all the work she's done in this area. One of the problems is that the societal stigma around fertility treatment still persists, and it is quite vicious and vocal, actually, around how it's not seen as a disease, it's not seen as something that is as of equal weight as other conditions. And I think part of this is that we need to change this in schools. There's been a lot of talk today about the government's sexual education programme. In schools, we're taught how not to get pregnant. You're never told that you might not be able to get pregnant. So I think there's seriously conversations there that need to be had around how we change this cultural stigma around fertility treatment, and starts in education in schools.
I think the honourable member's made a very, very good point here, and I think talking about the sex education in schools, it is absolutely imperative that we teach our children about all types of relationships, same-sex, heterosexual couples at an age-appropriate time. But 4- and 5-year-olds, in my opinion, need to be taught about same-sex couples as much as heterosexual couples. And I really hope that goes ahead. But I digress. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I want to pay tribute to all the organisations that have been helping me on my fertility workplace journey. Fertility Matters at Work, Fertility Network UK, Two Dads UK Plus, many more who help. It's been unquestionable and really, really vital to push towards the Fertility Workplace Pledge and improve access to IVF for everyone. When we discuss access to IVF treatment, there is one particular group, as we've heard, who can benefit from this treatment greatly and deserve equal access. The LGBTQ plus community is reliant, obviously, on IVF treatment to have their own biological children. And I was pleased to hear that the government promised to make access to fertility treatment fairer last year. For too long, many in the LGBTQ plus community have faced what has been labelled gay tax. And this is because LGBTQ couples have to pay privately for their first 6 to 12 rounds of artificial insemination to prove their infertility. which would then grant them access to the NHS IVF treatment, or to, as my honourable friend from the SNP said earlier, to prove that they need to have. Yeah, of course.
The lady for giving way, and would just remind her that that is only in England and Wales, that in Scotland, not to boast too much, but to hopefully share the positive experiences in Scotland, that it is the case that you don't have to go through that process in Scotland.
I thank the honourable lady for pointing that out, and it's not often that Scotland are ahead of England on the NHS, and I'm delighted to hear that today. But I acknowledge that this change in policy is going to take time to be implemented, but I would ask the Minister to look into speeding up the support for our LGBTQ communities, which is desperately needed in this area. You know, they should not have to wait even longer than a heterosexual couple. Ultimately, I believe that we are on the cusp of real progress when it comes to access and attitudes, and my honourable friend from Pontypridd has made it very clear about the attitudes towards IVF. It's really important that we break down these barriers from as early age as possible. And I know the Minister is passionate, like me, about supporting individuals as they decide to go through fertility treatment. And that is why I see it as vitally important, Mr Chairman, that we all work together to bring down the remaining few barriers to make IVF treatment a viable option for everyone and anyone who wishes to start their own family, and to make it as stress-free as possible.